In the annals of American criminal history, few cases have generated as much fascination and horror as the murder that occurred in 1947 Los Angeles. What began as the discovery of a mutilated corpse in a vacant lot would evolve into something far more disturbing than a simple homicide. The evidence uncovered in this case defies conventional understanding of both criminal behavior and physical possibility. The questions raised by this investigation continue to haunt those who dare to examine the classified files. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe for more paranormal discoveries. It was the morning of January 15, 1947, in the Leimert Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. The sun cast long shadows across the vacant lot on South Norton Avenue, where winter grass grew sparse between patches of bare earth. Betty Bersinger, a young mother, walked with her 3-year-old daughter toward the local shoe repair shop when she noticed what appeared to be a discarded mannequin lying in the weeds. The pale form lay bisected at the waist, positioned with mathematical precision, exactly 10 feet from the sidewalk. The upper and lower portions had been placed with deliberate care, separated by precisely 15 inches of empty space. What struck investigators immediately was not just the brutality of the crime, but the impossible cleanliness of the scene. The victim was later identified as Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old aspiring actress from Massachusetts. Short had arrived in California seeking fame in Hollywood, like thousands of other young women of her generation. She stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, with pale skin, green eyes, and jet black hair that had earned her the posthumous nickname that would define the case. Detective Harry Hansen of the Los Angeles Police Department arrived at the scene within hours of the discovery. His initial report, declassified decades later, contained details that were never released to the public. According to Hansen's notes, the body showed signs of what he termed surgical precision in its mutilation. The bisection had been performed with expertise that suggested medical training, yet the positioning of the remains indicated something far more disturbing. The corpse had been drained completely of blood, though no blood was found at the scene or in the surrounding area. This detail alone puzzled investigators, as the human body contains approximately 5 liters of blood. The complete absence of any blood evidence suggested the murder had occurred elsewhere, but the meticulous positioning of the body parts indicated hours of careful arrangement at the dump site. More disturbing were the facial mutilations. The victim's mouth had been cut from ear to ear, creating what investigators documented as a Glasgow smile. The cuts were made with surgical precision, extending exactly 2 3/4 inches on each side. The weapon used left no tool marks that forensic experts could identify, despite the availability of cutting-edge investigative techniques for the era. The autopsy, performed by Dr. Frederick Newbar, revealed additional impossibilities. The victim had been kept alive during the initial stages of torture, as evidenced by healing patterns in some of the wounds. However, the timeframe suggested by the healing process contradicted the established timeline of Short's disappearance. She had been seen alive on January 9th, yet the healing patterns indicated wounds that were at least 2 weeks old. Dr. Newbar's report, partially redacted in released documents, contained references to anomalous tissue samples and cellular structures inconsistent with known pathology. These references were never explained in subsequent reports, and Dr. Newbar himself refused to discuss the case in later interviews before his death in 1973. The investigation quickly expanded beyond a simple murder case. Short's movements in the days before her disappearance became the subject of intense scrutiny. She had been staying at various hotels and rooming houses throughout Los Angeles, never remaining in one location for more than a few days. Witnesses reported seeing her with different men, though descriptions of these companions varied wildly and often contradicted each other. One witness, Dorothy French, claimed Short had stayed at her family's home in Pacific Beach for several days in December 1946. French's account included details that investigators found impossible to verify. She described Short as being afraid of someone she wouldn't name and mentioned that Short had received phone calls that left her visibly shaken. Most puzzling was French's claim that Short had shown her a leather-bound notebook filled with names and addresses written in what appeared to be multiple different handwritings. This notebook was never found among Short's possessions, though investigators discovered something equally disturbing. In Short's room at the Chancellor Hotel, where she had stayed briefly in December, maintenance workers found a series of symbols carved into the wooden floor beneath the bed. The symbols formed a pattern that resembled no known alphabet or code system. Photographs of these markings were taken by police, but were classified immediately and have never been released to the public. The investigation took an even stranger turn when the killer began communicating with the press. On January 24th, 9 days after the body's discovery, the Los Angeles Examiner received a package containing Short's personal effects. The package included her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and her social security card. Each item had been carefully cleaned with gasoline to remove fingerprints, demonstrating a level of forensic awareness that was unusual for criminals of that era. The accompanying letter, composed of words cut from newspaper headlines, contained a message that read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings." Letter to follow. The promised letter arrived 3 days later, equally constructed from newspaper clippings. It contained a single sentence, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." What investigators found most disturbing about these communications was not their content, but their construction. Analysis of the newspaper clippings revealed they came from at least 17 different publications, some of which had been printed in cities across the United States. The oldest clipping dated back to 1943, suggesting the killer had been collecting materials for years before the murder occurred. The Los Angeles Police Department received over 50 confessions from individuals claiming responsibility for the murder. Each confession was investigated thoroughly, but none contained details that matched the classified evidence from the crime scene. More troubling was the fact that several of the confessors provided information that had never been released to the public, yet their accounts contradicted each other and the physical evidence in fundamental ways. One confessor, Arnold Smith, claimed to have killed Short in a hotel room downtown. His description of the murder method matched certain aspects of the forensic evidence, yet Smith had been incarcerated in San Francisco during the time period when the murder occurred. When questioned about this discrepancy, Smith maintained his confession but could not explain how he had committed the crime while behind bars. The investigation revealed disturbing patterns in Short's final weeks that suggested she may have been under surveillance. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a black sedan following her on different occasions, though the license plate numbers they provided led to vehicles that either didn't exist or had been reported stolen months earlier. The sedan was described consistently as a 1941 Ford, but Ford had not manufactured civilian vehicles in 1941 due to wartime production requirements. Perhaps most unsettling was the discovery made by investigators when they attempted to reconstruct Short's activities on January 8th, her last confirmed day alive. She had been seen at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, where she had made several phone calls from the lobby. Hotel records showed the calls were placed to numbers that, when traced, led to disconnected lines or businesses that had been closed for years. The hotel's telephone operator, Margaret Gibson, provided a statement that was immediately classified by investigators. Gibson claimed that Short had attempted to place a call to a number she recognized as belonging to a medical facility that had been demolished in 1944. When Gibson informed Short that the number was no longer in service, Short reportedly became agitated and insisted the facility was still operational. The case files contain references to evidence that was never fully explained. Crime scene photographs show what appear to be geometric patterns in the dirt around the body, though these patterns were attributed to natural causes in official reports. The patterns consisted of perfectly straight lines and precise angles that formed shapes resembling mathematical equations rather than random marks. Laboratory analysis of soil samples from the dump site revealed traces of chemicals that were not commercially available in 1940. The compounds were identified as preservatives typically used in medical or research facilities, yet no such facilities in the Los Angeles area reported any missing materials or unauthorized access to their supplies. The investigation was officially suspended in 1950, though it was never formally closed. The case files were sealed and classified under provisions typically reserved for matters of national security. When portions of the files were released decades later under Freedom of Information Act requests, entire sections had been redacted or removed entirely. In 1978, construction workers renovating the basement of a building near the original crime scene discovered a room that did not appear on any architectural plans. The room contained medical equipment from the 1940s, including surgical instruments and preservation tanks. Most disturbing was the presence of detailed anatomical drawings that precisely matched the mutilations found on Elizabeth Short's body. The drawings were accompanied by notes written in the same multiple handwritings that had been described in the missing notebook mentioned by Dorothy French. The notes reference procedures and techniques that were not developed until decades after Short's murder, yet the paper and ink were consistent with materials available in the 1940s. What do you think really happened to Elizabeth Short in those missing days before her death, and how do you explain the evidence that seems to transcend the boundaries of time itself? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official records reveal truths far stranger than fiction.